Hello everybody. Let's take up a question and ask JP today. The questioner today is Mani from Karimnagar. He's a student in Delhi University. Mani, please go ahead.
Hello, sir. Hope you are doing great. I'm Mani, a student of Ramjas College from Delhi. My first question is if you look at the leadership elections of political parties in the UK, legislators involved in this process actually hold a lot of responsibility and at the same time enjoys freedom to voice their opinion out. In comparison to this, how do you see Indian political parties and their internal party structures? And coming to my second question, you always stress the fact that we cannot compromise on our future for some short-term political gains because end of the day it only put pressure on our coming generations, and we don't want this to happen. So keeping this in mind, this brings me to Alvin Toffler's Future Shock, where he discusses about in our transition from industrial to super industrial societies, we need to cope up with the rapidly changing environment. So, how do you see India reacting to change? Let it be in terms of policies or let it be in any particular field. How do you see India actually reacting to change? Because we have seen what happened with the farm laws. So, I would really love to hear your reflections on this. And thanks for this opportunity. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mani. There are several layers in Mani's question. The first one is about internal party democracy, as opposed to what we have seen in Rishi Sunak's elevation to prime ministership. And earlier, when Boris Johnson had to be eased out, and Liz Truss became the prime minister. Now, without going into the specifics of what happened politically in Britain, the process is marvelous. If the legislators lose confidence in the prime minister or the leader of the party, there is a system by which any member or a set of members, as per rules, can ask for a vote to change the leader. And if they prevail by due process, the leader has to step down. That means the leader is not anointed. The leader is not king. The leader cannot bully the members of parliament or legislature of his party. The leader must bow to the majority. And the legislators in turn, they bow to the will or the current mood of the people. Because after all, they want to get elected. They want their party to prevail. They want their party to get power or to retain power. The system is working beautifully. Unfortunately, we haven't evolved such a system. Actually, from a relative democratic management of parties, we became an autocratic system of party management. Some are overtly and crudely so, dynastic parties, totally around the family. Political parties became personal fiefdoms. Almost everybody in the party is entirely beholden to the party boss. It's a monarchical culture, a culture of individual worship. And on top of it, we also very unwisely created certain constitutional mechanisms that strengthen the party leadership's position vis-a-vis the party members. For instance, the anti-defection law brought in with good intentions, the 10th schedule, the 52nd amendment, later on 91st amendment. On paper, it looks nice, but in reality, it created death knell to the political party structure, democracy within the parties, and parliamentary debate. No member today can open her heart and speak honestly. No member can actually contribute creatively and constructively. You simply have to raise your hand in support of whatever the party bosses dictate, or else you lose your position. And the whip is used recklessly. And unless this kind of a whip system goes, either you repeal the anti-defection law, or if you continue with that, make sure that the whip can be issued with any kind of penalty applicable only in rare situations, namely about the change of a government, confidence or no confidence motions, or approval of a budget. Not all and sundry. Not on piece of legislation. If a legislator has no capacity to reflect on a proposal and come to an independent conclusion as to what is right or wrong for his constituents and for the people of the country, then it's no longer a democracy, it's a It's like Afghan tribal leaders coming and sitting and giving simply numbers. I have this number, you have this number, let us see what is it. It's arithmetic. There's no debate. There's no policy input. There's no legislation. There's no representation. So it's a combination. Germany has a law, a federal law, mandating democracy within the political parties. And there's a mechanism to regulate the parties' functioning. Many other countries don't have them. They have practices. India has neither law nor practice. The parties are autocratic, whereas party system is real. Without parties in our electoral system and the way our society is at this point of time, it's almost impossible for a non-party independent to get the favor of the people. And therefore parties are real. And if the parties which are so central to the functioning of a democracy themselves function undemocratically, then the democracy itself is severely flawed. And that's what money is referring to. So we have, I believe, a case in this country to make a law regulating political parties, not in terms of what they want to do, or not in terms of their agenda or their message, but in terms of their organization and functioning. Political parties are central to people's participation in democratic politics. They are people's platforms. If they are people's platforms but not private estates, then the people must have rights and obligations. Therefore, membership of a political party, leadership choice, the fundraising and utilization, and finally, perhaps most importantly in India, the candidate nominated by the political party for elective office, the B form, the nomination of candidates by the party. All these must be governed by law and democratic practices regulated by law. Without that, I don't think that our democracy will become richer or deeper. Today we have a normative democracy, but parties generally tend to function very similarly, stifling the freedom of members. It became the plaything of top leaders and dynasties and political fiefdoms. Now, insofar as future generations protecting their interests and reconciling the short-term interests with the long-term good, particularly in a rapidly changing society, as future shock, Alvin Toffler's future shock, almost 45, 50 years ago talked about. What do we do? Now, some societies which don't have the democratic constraints, which are strong leadership and social acceptance of leadership's vision and direction, they obviously are responding much more quickly to rapid changes. Singapore is an outstanding example. It's a democratic society, but a democracy that does not paralyze decision making. They designed a unique set of institutions and mechanisms to make rational, evidence-based, rapid decision making and effective and speedy execution are possible. China, from another end, there's no formal democracy, there's no free election. But if you take that out, China has some elements of democracy, effective decentralization, a proper succession in place. Now, Xi Jinping is now violating that succession plan, which ran for 30 years successfully. Now he sort of anointed himself as leader for life. Let's see what the future brings. But even now, there is a proper mechanism for meritocratic elevation. Competent and experienced people rising to the top. There is a mechanism available. And there is a culture of rational, evidence-based decision making. Democratic societies are finding it harder because you have to go back to the people and get their mandate. And therefore, sometimes you have to pander to the lowest common denominator because you have to get the vote. The vote is not distributed unequally, it's equally distributed. Rich or poor, which is good. Male or female, which is good. Wise or unwise, good or bad, that's the way democracies function. Informed or uninformed. People without prejudices or with prejudices, everybody carries the vote. So unless you appeal to the vote, the majority, and get their support, you have no chance at power. And therefore, world over, not only in countries like India, even in richer countries, there is a temptation to give up the long-term good, polarize society excessively, and focus largely or entirely on the short-term gains to individual voters. And that obviously weakens those societies. But I think without in any way compromising on basic postulates of democracy, we can do a few things to make things better in our countries. Can we create more and more meritocratic institutional and decision-making mechanisms? Even within the parties, can there be a robust research and evidence-based analysis of issues and a transparent debate before decisions are made so that alternatives are available, they're examined? Most often, the policies of governments in India are simply top-down policies by a top man. The whim, whatever appeals to the individual, like Tughlaq, that becomes the policy. There is no system, even within a political party, to discuss, to debate, to research, to examine the alternatives, and to come to a rational conclusion. We do require decision makers finally, a cabinet or sometimes even an individual, but that must be based on the foundation of solid research and evidence and logic, and some amount of discussion and debate. That does not necessarily preclude decision making, but it actually strengthens decision making and gives it the broadest measure of support when the decision is made. The reason why the farm laws failed is not because the laws are bad, they were excellent laws. They were necessary laws for the country. They are not sufficient laws to make the farm sector better off, but they are necessary laws. Give the farmers the freedom that is so vital in the market. Give them the options, give them the predictability. And to remove the total extremely dysfunctional control of the government, regulation through Essential Commodities Act and various control orders. All these have been detrimental to the farm sector. But if that were more broad-based, if there was more debate in the parliament, if there was even a committee stage, if you waited for 75 years, if you wait for a few weeks, no great harm is done. If you actually open it up, then maybe we could have had an acceptable reform. So sometimes our anxiety to push through a reform quickly may actually become counterproductive. But that's what democracy is about. Democracy is not always about efficiency. It's also about acceptability. There's no guarantee that in a democracy always right things get done. But even if the right things get done, it's important to make sure that the majority of people understand and they have a chance to express their own concerns and they're adequately taken on board and they're addressed. And finally, India is not doing too badly in addressing the challenges of the future. Take energy sector, take improving the infrastructure, though belatedly, take some of the areas where technologically we are actually leading and pioneering, for instance, the UPI, but it's not enough. China perhaps is an outstanding example today of a large economy which is really moving with times. Take any area, not only have they really mastered the traditional areas of economic activity, manufacturing, traditional exports and goods and services, but they're actually going into all the new economy areas. The electric cars, the batteries, the storage batteries, the hydrogen fuel, the space technologies, the digital technologies, and the raw material required for the future economy. They are now the masters of most of the lithium and rare earths which are required for the new economy of the next 30, 40, 50, 100 years, both in terms of procurement of raw materials and accessing them, and in terms of processing and utilizing them. They are now the leaders. That means there is a meritocratic leadership, deep reflection, evidence-based, logical approach to decision-making, and a capacity to actually execute and deliver. It's not enough to have a sound policy and good ideas. Unless you build an administrative mechanism, a machine, with accountability that actually delivers speedily and efficiently and fairly and justly, all our intentions will go to naught. China has done it. Not everything is because China is not a democracy. That's a misreading of Chinese situation. In fact, China failed wherever they acted in an autocratic manner. The Great Leap Forward, the Cultural Revolution are two outstanding monuments to human stupidity. China succeeded wherever they decentralized powers. Local governments are very strong and effective. There is genuine participation locally. There is improvement of infrastructure, high quality education accessible to every single child in the country, irrespective of economic status. Not good enough, but reasonably good healthcare system. So all these are democratic elements. We can embrace them without undermining democracy. Therefore, using democracy as an alibi for a failure to make decisions or to execute speedily is actually an act of laziness. Democracy does not preclude competent and sensible decision making with the future in mind. And democracy certainly does not preclude competent and efficient and fair delivery of services. We're using that as an alibi. India must do a lot. Yes, democracy makes it a little harder. You require the broad consensus in advance, not after the event. It's a little harder. But that's a system we cheerfully have chosen. That's a system we want to live with, because without democracy, there's a danger that utterly autocratic, dysfunctional dictators come and undermine society. There are far more examples of dictatorship failing than democracy failing. Therefore, on balance, we have to make our democracy work better, but with an eye on the global rapid developments, technological, societal, and institutional. And I hope India is capable of doing it, because we are a very flexible society. We are a very pragmatic society. Therefore, despite our poverty, there are many areas where actually consensus is more available in a country like India than in a country like the United States. I'm very optimistic, but we need to do a lot more to look into the future and to build consensus for the right kind of decisions very swiftly.